Imagine being one of the laughing stocks of the leagues, of the American League one year, and then the next year somehow you're actually a very decent team. The Baltimore Orioles have had a history of being the laughing stocks. Heck, like between 1998 and 2013, they were practically laughing stocks of the American League, even more so than the Tampa Bay Rays. But yeah, but this is not the story about those Orioles. This is a story about how the Baltimore Orioles became such a laughing stock in 1988. And then in 1989, they got all the pieces together and made a great pennant drive, only to fall in the final weekend of the season. Not many teams can go from worst to first, except if you're the Braves and Twins in 1991. But the fact is, this team almost went for worst to first and made people love them. So let's talk about the 1989 Baltimore Orioles. You've got Jeff Diamond, you've got one man, you've got a hat, a bat, and that's definitely not all. You got the bleachers, got from spring to fall, you got a dog, a drink, and that umpire's call. What do you want? Let's play what if. Okay, okay, Cutter, do some what ifs. Okay, okay, Cutter, do some what ifs. The major story about the Baltimore Orioles franchise just has to do with the fact that they weren't originally in Baltimore. I know baseball purists and historians would practically say, wasn't there a Baltimore Orioles team in 1901 and 1902 when the modern Major League started? Yes, but those guys were not the Baltimore Orioles we all know and hate in a sense. Well, in my case, the Battle of the Birds with the Blue Jays and the Orioles. But no, they were the New York Yankees. People forget that the New York Yankees, that baseball was not always in New York in the American League. For the first 2 years, it was in Baltimore, where Baltimore was known in the 1890s for having great teams, but they would cheat. They would put their fingers around other opposing players' belt buckles, meaning that they lost some speed. They would water down the infield, the slow balls down. They would put high outfield grass so much so that they would actually take extra balls and throw them in the infield to get people out. They would do lots of loopholes. They were one of the most fast of cheaters in baseball. But Baltimore would soon find their baseball footing in 1953 after St. Louis decided they can't have both the American League and National League in it. There was a time that the St. Louis Cardinals were actually more likely to fold or relocate than the St. Louis Browns of the American League because that's where the team was in St. Louis, the Browns, since 1901. So the St. Louis Browns actually were decent, but they only had a few good seasons. 1922 was when they were very close to winning the AL, losing to the Yankees. But the fact of the matter is, the Browns had troubles. Bill Feck, great entrepreneur, had the Browns for a while. In fact, the St. Louis Browns were supposed to move to Los Angeles, and it would have been a great move for Major League Baseball putting a team in California as early as 1942. But unfortunately, that vote was shelved because of the whole Pearl Harbor thing. So the Browns would struggle in St. Louis for another decade before they finally left, this time for Baltimore. So Baltimore got the Orioles, and within a few years, they got some notoriety as Hoyt Wilhelm threw a no hitter in 1958. The Orioles were decent, but they reached another level of superstardom by 1966 when the Baltimore Orioles got a gift from the Cincinnati Reds, who decided to trade Frank Robinson because he was not really a young 30, as Bill DeWitt put it. So basically, the Reds wanted Mil Pappas from the Orioles. So the Reds wanted a good batter, but Pappas sucked. He would throw a no hitter for the Cubs in 1972. It would have been a perfect game if it wasn't for Bruce Fleming's bad play. But the fact of the matter was that Baltimore was starting to get in their own. By 1966, they were huge in the American League and all of that. So much so, they shut down the Los Angeles Dodgers in the World Series. Heck, they had a 33 inning scoreless streak. The Orioles held the Dodgers to 33 straight innings without a run. Amazing. And this is the same Dodgers team that had Koufax and Drysdale in their last season together, as Koufax would retire after the 66 season because of an arthritic elbow. But yeah, the Orioles fought along. 1969, they were supposed to be fantastic. They were supposed to blow everyone out of the water. They did in the American League, and they were supposed to make mincemeat of the New York Mets, who only 7 years prior were just an expansion team that lost 120 games, the most in the National League. Not in all baseball, because the White Sox in 2024 just surpassed it. But the fact of the matter is that the Orioles won game one, then lost the next four as the Mets pitching, including a young Nolan Ryan, blew them out of the water. Fortunately for Baltimore, they got revenge in 1970, winning the World Series against Cincinnati. Frank Robinson got revenge on the team that dumped him off because he was not a young 30. It wasn't Frank Robinson's World Series. It was Brooks Robinson's World Series. No relation. As Brooks, as the human vacuum cleaner and recently deceased, played great defense. He had many great defensive plays, including in Cincinnati and Baltimore, and practically the Orioles took care of the Reds. 1971, the Orioles did get to the World Series, facing Pittsburgh in the World Series that had the first ever night game was 1971, but you didn't know that. The Orioles actually lost Game 7 to Steve Blass and the Pirates. Unfortunately, this would be the last World Series that Roberto Clemente would play in, as he died on New Year's Eve 1972 in a crash trying to get Nicaragua some earthquake supplies. But let's not mince words here. The Baltimore Orioles were pretty good. Of course, Steve Blass would have the yips a couple years later. But yeah, the Orioles were plodding along. 1979, they were up 3-1 on the Pirates. It looked like the Orioles were going to get revenge for 71. But it didn't happen. The Pirates somehow in some way won the next 3 games, and the Orioles screwed up. Thanks to Pop Stargell and the We Are Family philosophy. The Orioles were in the 1983 World Series, shocking the Philadelphia Phillies in 5 games, beating the Weiss kids and getting Cal Ripken Jr. in his second year in Major Leagues a World Series ring. So the Orioles got revenge. The Orioles were plodding along. They had some decent teams in the mid-90s, but they just couldn't get over the hump to get to the World Series. And I believe 1983 was the last time they've been to the World Series, unless I'm wrong. Probably not. 2014, they had a golden chance in the LCS against the Kansas City Royals, but Kansas City swept them. Baltimore's a great young club, and they could do a lot of damage in the 2025 season. Of course, this is being taped before the 2025 season starts. So anyway, let's take a look at the 1989 Baltimore Orioles, and what a turnaround from one of the most shit seasons ever. So let's look at the 1989 Baltimore Orioles. This was the 89th season in Orioles history, the 36th in Baltimore, and the 36th at Memorial Stadium. This was 3 years before they moved to Camden Yards. They finished second in the AL East. They only won 54 games in 1988. It was one of the worst seasons ever. Heck, the Orioles have the worst start to a season ever. They were 0-21. Not even the 62 Mets or 2024 White Sox were that bad to start the season. The Orioles were 0-21. In fact, there was a DJ who around the 13th game said he would not leave the air until the Orioles won a game. Well, 8 games later, fuck. So anyway, you know, the Orioles sucked that year in 1988. They would make some moves, and they were in the final 3 games against the Blue Jays. The Orioles actually made one of the big moves. Well, not only did they pick up Randy Milligan in a minor league deal from the Pirates, they actually traded Eddie Murray, who was the heart and soul of the Orioles for 11 years, to Los Angeles for Ken Howell, Brian Holton, and Juan Bell. Not really household names. Ken Howell would actually be traded 4 days later to Philly for Phil Bradley, which actually worked out because Phil Bradley was a decent part of the team. And Baltimore traded Carl Nichols for Dave Johnson, a starting pitcher who actually was supposed to be pretty good. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. So anyway, the Orioles' biggest move would be off the field with new uniforms. So they actually had the ensemble featuring black belts, replacing the elastic waistbands, and then they would put black numbers and letters with orange outline on the away version. The most noticeable change was the caps and helmets that went from the tri-colored smiling cartoon bird to a monochromatic black with an ornithologically correct Oriole. The smiling cartoon bird head would come back in 2012, but nevertheless. So Baltimore had their starters. Brady Anderson, who would go on to hit 50 home runs 7 years later, probably juiced, I don't know. Phil Bradley, who was in that move and would move on to other teams. Steve Finley, yes, Steve Finley, legendary Diamondback, Dodger, Astro. He was once a Baltimore Oriole. And yes, he was traded to Houston in the big Glenn Davis deal a couple years later. Rene Gonzalez, Cal Ripken Jr., still playing big at shortstop. Dave Schmidt, the pitcher, who would go on to play for the Expos. Larry Sheets, who was a decent outfielder. Mickey Tettleton, a great catcher before the Orioles decided to trade him to Detroit for the one of Jeff M. Robinson. Jim Traber, who would victimize the Blue Jays in 1988 as a member of the Cleveland Indians, as Traber was the guy who broke up. No, sorry, not with the Indians, but Jim Traber broke up a Dave Steve no hitter in late 1988, and Craig Worthington. Craig McDonald won the last game of the season with his first career win. He would be the sixth man to make the majors the same season as he was picked number one overall in the baseball draft. Of course, Bill Ripken, uh, Cal's brother, his Fleer baseball card made national news because it was a hidden obscurity. The words "fuckface" on it. It was printed in black marker on the knob of the. Uh, Once the discovery was made public, subsequent printings of the card were issued with the words "obscured." The first obscuring had a blob of white out, and another was scribbled with black pen while the last was covered with a black square. So anyway, the Orioles were decent among minor teams. They were 10-3 against Detroit. They sucked against Minnesota. They were actually 7-6 against the eventual AL East champion Toronto Blue Jays. So so Baltimore picked up Brick Shoe in a small deal, but it worked out. In the baseball draft, they got Ben McDonald with the first overall pick. Because they were the worst team in Major League Baseball, they were given the number one pick. Greg Son was drafted in the 17th round by the Orioles. He soon would go on to much better fame with the Marlins and the Blue Jays, especially in the broadcast booth. Jamie Quirk was signed by the Orioles. Not much there. Pitching, Jeff Ballard, decent guy. No, not the Jose Batista that we all know and love from the Blue Jays. That's a different Jose Batista. I think that was his uncle. Pete Harnsich, who would go on to Houston in the disastrous Glenn Davis trade. Brian Holton, who would go on to play for the Mariners and Expos. I think he went to the Expos and then, no, I don't know, Brian Holton. I don't know where he came from. I know he was a Blue Jay, Expo. Yeah, I think he was traded to the Mariners in that thing. Brian, yeah, he was traded to Baltimore. Oh, I thought that Brian Holton was the guy who was there with San Diego. I thought he was a Seattle Blue Expo, but it was not. Dave Johnson, Ben McDonald, Ben McDonald had the budge. E-I-E-I-O. Bob Milacki, Greg Olson, who came out of freaking nowhere to be Baltimore's closer and the AL Rookie of the Year. Kurt Schilling, yes, Kurt Schilling was a Baltimore Oriole at one time. Heck, he was a Boston Red Sox before Baltimore Orioles. So he went from Boston to Baltimore, and then he went to Houston in the disastrous Glenn Davis trade alongside Pete Harnsich and Steve Finley. Mark Furman was there too. Mark Williamson, a good setup guy for Olson, but he was basically the GOAT. Not the greatest of all time, but the GOAT in the last series against the Blue Jays. Chris Hose being the catcher, Bob Melvin and Jimmy Quirk being veteran presences, Mickey Townsend as well. Rene Gonzalez, number 88. You don't see that on a baseball player. Randy Milligan, who was okay. Billy Ripken, Cal Ripken, Rick Shue, Jim Traber, and Craig Worthington infielders. Outfielders Brian Anderson, Phil Bradley, Mike Devereaux, Steve Finley, and Joe Orzelak. With Larry Sheets and Keith Moreland doing their jobs. With Frank Robinson being the manager of the Orioles. Smart move by the Orioles to get Frank Robinson there. So you see the lineup there. The main guys. Larry Sheet was the top DH. All that. Pitching wise, Jeff Ballard with 18 wins. A fantastic job by Ballard. Lucky won 14. Pete Harnsich was actually 5-9. And all that. Kurt Schilling only played 5 games with the 1989 Orioles. Greg Olson had 27 saves, and he was named Rookie of the Year. The most important thing was about Mark Williamson and Pete Harnsich was the final weekend of the season. The Orioles needed to win 2 out of 3 to force a one-game playoff on the following Monday in Baltimore. But the Blue Jays rallied. Blue Jays rallied in the 8th inning of the Friday night game, which was game 1 of the series, and which Mark Williamson botched it. And Lloyd Moseby hit a massive hit in the 11th inning with the game almost at midnight Eastern time. The Blue Jays beat the Orioles there. So the Orioles needed to sweep the Blue Jays on the weekend to force the one-game playoff in Baltimore on Monday. But the Blue Jays didn't let that happen. Pete Harnsich was actually supposed to start the Saturday game, but he stepped on a nail and unfortunately couldn't go. So Dave Johnson came out of freaking nowhere, and he nearly flattened the Blue Jays. In 7+ innings, he actually did well against the Blue Jays, but then the Blue Jays just hacked away at the bullpen, especially Mark Williamson, which was shocking. They decided to put Williamson back on the mound after what he did the previous game. But yeah, the Blue Jays rallied to win 4-3. Larry Sheets was struck out by Tom Henke at 5:39 p.m. on September 30th, 1989, giving the Blue Jays the AL East. The Blue Jays were actually 12-24 to start the season. They got to the ALCS, but Ricky Henderson just basically destroyed them. So the question remains, what would the Orioles have done against those powerful A's? Well, we shall find out. So, this is what would happen. If the Baltimore Orioles were the AL East champion and not those pesky Toronto Blue Jays, this is what would happen. They would play in Oakland. Oakland had the most wins, and I think the West had, yeah, they had the most wins. So they would host. So those are the starting lineups and all that. Dave Stewart was the game 1 LCS starter in real life, so that's why he's going to be first. And he'll face Jeff Ballard. Not Mallard, Ballard. So we'll get that underway in just a second. Here we go. Game 1. Game 1 sees the Orioles shock the world and win 6-5 in game 1. Wow. They score 3 runs in the 4th. Craig Worthington hits a double to score Orzelak. And then Mike Devereaux hits a double to score Ripken and Worthington. So that's amazing. They're up 3-0. And then Mickey Tettleton crushes one to right field. Man, why did they? Well, I know Chris Hoyles was a decent guy, but Tettleton to Detroit? That hurt. And then Larry Sheets hits a double, scores Worthington, and Devereaux doubles to score Larry Sheets. So that puts Eric Plunk, who the Yankees traded to Oakland. Yeah, the Yankees traded to Oakland, right? Oh no, sorry, he was Oakland and then got traded to the Yankees for Ricky Henderson, I think, right? Well, anyway, not the matter. Tony Phillips is not basically with Carly Lansford, and then Mark Williamson comes in to pitch. Henderson grounds out. Parker walks. Hendu walks. Steinbach makes it bases loaded. Greg Olson comes in for the save. Gallego hits a fielder's choice to score Parker. Lansford hits a double to score Henderson. Tony Phillips hits a single to score Gallego and Lansford. It's now 6-5. Konsenko singles, but then Mark McGuire strikes out, and somehow Olson saves the day. Stewart loses in the LCS, which never happened. 5 1/3. Eric Plunk inning 2/3. Jim Corsi 2 innings. Yeah, Eric Plunk got traded to the Yankees. I have his card with the Yankees. Jeff Ballard 7 innings. Kevin Hickey pitched 8th. Williamson pitched the first out, and then couldn't do it, and then Olson had to come in to get his mess. So Ballard game 1. Pete Harnsich would start game 2 against Stormy Davis. Not Stormy Daniels, Stormy Davis. And the Orioles win game 2, 7-5. Phil Bradley hits a 2-run tater tot to make it 2-0. Phil Bradley. But Dave Henderson hits a grand slam after McGuire, Henderson, and Parker are on. So Dave Henderson makes it 4-2. But Mickey Tettleton does it again with a home run, make it 4-3. Stormy Davis uncorks a wild pitch to score Orsolak. Then Gene Nelson comes in to pitch. But Larry Sheets hits a triple. Worthington scores. Make it 5-4. They tie the game. Oakland ties the game in the seventh as Canseco hits a single score. Lansford, Kevin Hickey came in. But after Rick Honeycutt came in to pitch and walked Sheets with the bases loaded, to make the bases loaded, Billy Ripken flies out to right field to score Orsolak to make it 6-5. Carney Lansford boots a routine grounder. Olsen comes in for the save and gets Gallego, Lansford, and Tony to strike out on their own. Story 5 and third. Gene Nelson is the loser with 2 innings. Rick Honeycutt and then Greg Cataract. I think Cataract was a Yankee at the time. When it was the Yankee. But anyway, Carnage 6 and 2/3. Hickey with the win. Olsen with the save. Off to Memorial Stadium. And it'll be Bob Milacki going up against Mike Moore, right? No, Bob Welsh started game 3. So Milacki versus Welsh. And in Baltimore, the Orioles crush it 9-2. Dave Henderson hits a 2-run home run to right center. And then the 7th inning was when they came through. Tony Phillips hits a double to score Lansford. Jose Canseco hits a 2-run homer down the line to make it 5-0. Brian Holton comes in to pitch. McGuire gets hit by pitch. Henderson grounds out, but Dave Parker singles to score McGuire 6-0. Tony Phillips hits a single to score Lansford, and then Canseco hits another 2-run home run, getting Jose Bautista, not that one, to pitch. And then Mickey Tettleton hits a double to score Mike Devereaux and Phil Bradley. Eric Plunk comes in out of the bullpen and finishes the job. Milwaukee only goes 6 in the third. Brian Holton just sucked that game, and Jose Bautista ending the third. Welsh went 7 in the third, then Eric Plunk came in. Finish it off. Dave Johnson comes in to be the 4th starter. He will face Mike Moore, who, they go 4-man rotation. Mike Moore in game 4 in real life. But the Orioles win 7-2. They're 1 win away from shocking the world. Henderson, Ricky single score McGuire, then Dave Henderson scores Ricky to make it 2-0. But bottom of the second, Cal Ripken hits a GRD grand reel double score Orsolak, and Billy Ripken hits a sac fly 2-2. Then Craig Worthington singles doubles to score Cal, make it 3-2. And then Ripken comes in after Orsolak hits a single and drives a 2-run home run to make it 5-2. Randy Milligan singles Phil Bradley home. Joe Orsolak doubles to score Milligan. Mark Williamson came in to pitch. Had troubles, bases loaded. Greg Olsen comes in and gets Canseco to swing and miss for strike 3. Olsen does get the save. Johnson 7 innings, Hickey an inning without giving up anything. Then Williamson 2/3 before Olsen comes in for the last out for the save. Mike Moore 7 innings, Plunk the rest. So now Oakland has to go back to Dave Stewart, and Baltimore has to go back to Jeff Ballard. Will Baltimore take out the Oakland A's? The answer is yes, they will. The Orioles shocked the world by taking out the A's in 5 and practically making one of the biggest ALCS upsets of all time. Larry Sheets singles to score Ripken. Phil Bradley gets an RBI single to score Sheets. Templeton hits a double to score Devereaux and Phil Bradley 4-0. And that's it. Williamson comes in for the 9th and gets Parker Henderson out. Ballard went 7. Hickey went an inning. Williamson an inning. And they were flawless. Dave Stewart again loses with Gene Nelson pitching the 8th. So the Oakland A's would have been crushed by the Orioles. So now the Orioles take on the pesky San Francisco Giants of 1989. So anyway, there's no DH. Well, there is a DH. Matt Williams comes in the DH. Ernie Riles. Did the Giants have someone in 89 that had Sheridan, but no. Okay, so yeah. So Ballard was the last guy to pitch. So Harnsich would pitch game 1 of the World Series. The Giants in real life went, well, Russia and Garrett's, wasn't it? Hold on, I have to take a look. So Scott Garrett's pitched game 1 in real life in the World Series. So he'll face Pete Harnsich in game 1 in Baltimore. Because the AL got home field for the 89 World Series because they did a rotation. And the Orioles win 3-1, a shocker. As Phil Bradley singles scored Billy Ripken. And then Will Clark hits a double to score Ernie Riles in the sixth. But in the bottom half, Orsolak gets a single to score Tettleton, and Ripken scores Orsolak 3-1. Olsen comes in for the save and gets Uribe, Butler, and Riles out. Harnsic goes 6 2/3 for the win. Hickey in the third, and Olsen for the save. Scott Garrett's won 7. Steve Bedrosian, the former NL Cy Young winner for the Phillies. Game 2 went to Rick Russell. Game 2 goes to Bob Malachy. I decided to go with Bob Malachy for Game 2, with the promise of Jeff Ballard pitching Game 3. And Baltimore wins 6-2. Yeah, so 6-2. Tettleton scores Bradley with a single, 1-0. And then Joe Orsolak hits a triple to score Milligan. Worthington triples to score Orsolak. Man, Baltimore's Memorial Stadium. Maldonado botches a fly ball, and the Orioles score the fourth run. Ernie Riles does get a double score. Jose Uribe. Cal Ripken went deep in the sixth. Worthington singles to score Orsolak. And then there was a run. Malachy went 7 2/3 for the win. Hickey picks up the save. Russell goes 7 2/3. Bedrosian pitched the eighth. So it's off to San Francisco and off to Jeff Ballard for Game 3 and Don Robinson for Game 3 for the Giants. And it should be Matt Williams at third base. Yeah, it's Matt Williams at third base. In San Francisco, no earthquake. The Giants win 5-4. Randy Milligan does get an RBI groundout, scoring several. Will Clark singles score Butler. Then Don Robinson hits a sac fly for the Giants to make it 2-1. Mickey Tettleton goes deep, scoring himself. Well, Jeff Ballard hit a double, so pitchers could hit. DH, I don't need no stinking DH. Tettleton makes it 2-run homer, makes it 3-2. Uribe gets hit by a pitch, walking in a run. Then Jeff Ballard, of all people, hit a home run down the right field line, making 4-3 Orioles. But Candy Maldonado hit a home run 4-4, future Blue Jay. It was 4-4 to the bottom of the seventh as he hit it. Maldonado singled to score Mitchell, and Mark Williamson had to come in to pitch. At 5-4, Craig Lefferts came in for the save. Orsolak flew out. Ripken struck out. Worthington walked, but Billy Ripken flew out. So Don Robinson went 6, but he didn't get the win. It was Bedrosian with Lefferts picking up the save. And Jeff Ballard, 5 innings, didn't get the game. It was Hickey, the loser, Mark Williamson there. So Game 4 would see Dave Johnson versus Scott Garrett. No, not Scott. Against Mike Krukow, the legend Mike Krukow, who would be in the Giants booth. And it went 16 innings before the Giants went 4-2. Mickey Tettleton made it 1-0 in the first. Then it was 1-1 off a mistake by Ripken Jr., which is unlikely. Orsolak singled to score Bradley in the fifth. And then in the bottom of the eighth, Kevin Mitchell goes deep. That's why he's the NL MVP. Kevin Hickey came in to pitch. It was 2-2 in the ninth. And then in the 10th, Mike Devereaux got to third base, but Tettleton struck out. Milligan was intentionally walked, and Orsolak grounded out the first. Ken Orkerfeld came in to pinch hit for Jeff Brantley. Nothing happened. Goose Gossage was part of the 89 Giants. Well, anyway, he came to pitch. Runner on second, but Stan Jefferson came in for Williamson, struck out looking. So Mark Furman had to pitch. The Giants didn't do anything. Ali Hamaker with the 89 Giants. I'm surprised he was still there. Yeah, he was the 83 guy who gave up the home run to Lynn in the All-Star game. The only time a Grand Slam has happened in the All-Star game. So it was first and second, he got out of it. Ernie Riles would pinch hit for Hamaker, getting Mike Lacoste to come in the game. Larry Sheets had to come in for Furman to pinch hit, and it didn't work out. Jose Batista, not that one, came in to pitch. The 15th, nothing. In the bottom of the 15th, Greg Liddon came in to pinch hit for Lacoste, making Bob Nepper, former Astros player of 86, come in. Brady Anderson had to come in to pinch hit for Batista, and he ran it out to second. Jay Tibbs came in to pitch. Butler grounded out. Matt Williams walked, and then Kevin Mitchell showed why he was still MVP, winning that 4-2 game. So the Giants went with 7 pitchers: Krukow, Bedrosian, Brantley, Gossage, Hamaker, Lacoste, and Nepper. Baltimore went with Dave Johnson, Kevin Hickey, Mark Williamson, Mark Furman, Jose Batista, not that one as I said, and Jay Tibbs. So then we go to game 5. It was Harnsich versus Garrett's. And game 5 sees the Giants win 5-1. So all the home teams won. Kettleton made it 1-0 in the first. Kevin Mitchell again hits a home run to make it 1-1. Then it was 1-1 to the bottom of the 8th. Butler lined out. Mac Williams got hit by pitch. Mitchell walked. And then Clark gets a single to score Williams. Kevin Hickey comes into pitch, but Robbie Thompson hits a single to score Kevin Mitchell. Maldonado walks, bases loaded. Kennedy takes a bases loaded walk, so does Uribe. Scott Garrett hits in a double play. Tim Hollett came in for Hickey and fouled up. Scott Garrett's pitches the whole 9 innings for the win. Harnsich 7 1/3, and then Kevin Hickey just sucked. So it's off to Baltimore for game number 6. And it will be Rusho versus Malaki. And in game 6, it was the Orioles winning again 2-1. So every home team has won. It was a battle till the bottom of the 4th when Tettleton hits a home run, and then Orsulak scores Milligan with a double. Ernie Riles gets an RBI ground to make it 2-1. And then Mitchell, Clark, and Williams all go out in the 9th. Bob Malaki pitches 105 pitches for the win. Complete game. Rusho 6 innings. Bedrosian did well in relief. But anyway, so it was up to the 2 most dangerous words in the English language. Game 7. Don Robinson versus Jeff Ballard. Who would win? Battle 3-4-3s. And it will be the Baltimore Orioles would have won the World Series in 7 games against the Giants 8-1. It was a close one. Tettleton hits a 2-run home run to make it 2-0. Orsulak doubles to score Tettleton and Milligan. Then Ripken gets a double to score Orsulak 5-0. Orsulak then hit a 2-run home run, making Lacoste come in the game 7-0. Kevin Mitchell singles to score Butler. Craig Worthington goes deep. Brian Holton pitches the 9th, gets Williams get a single. Thompson strikes out, Maldonado flies out, and Kennedy grounds out. So Ballard went 8 innings and Holton the 9th. Robinson, Lacoste, and McCammond. Randy McCammond? Him? Couldn't put Bedrosian for game number 7? But yeah, the Baltimore Orioles would have had their birds of a feather and would have went from worst to first and the World Series in 7 games over the Giants. That's just how it goes, I guess. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.